Frank Miller stared at the star map in his quarters aboard the UES Vigilant. The red dots marked where the colonies had gone dark. 7 dots now. 7 colonies silent in the past 3 months. He ran his hand over his tired face. 20 years in the United Earth Defense Force, and he had never seen anything like this. No distress calls, no debris fields, no radiation signatures. Just silence where thousands of people once lived. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door slid, open to reveal Laura Bennett, the ship's intelligence officer. Her usual confident stance was gone, replaced by something Frank recognized all too well. Fear. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, placing a data tablet on his desk. Frank picked it up and scrolled through the report. "An energy signature? Are we sure this isn't just sensor ghosts?" "Command ran it through every filter we have. It's real. Something was there just before each colony went silent. Something big." Frank nodded slowly. "They're calling it the Phantom, according to this. Cute name for something that might have killed over 15,000 people." Laura shifted uncomfortably. "Most of the brass think it's just sensor malfunctions or pirate raids. But this signature..." She pointed to a waveform graph. "It doesn't match anything in our database." Frank studied the pattern. There was something familiar about it, something that tugged at old memories. During the First Contact War, he had spent 3 months in a cell next to a captured Altarian scout. The alien had been half mad with fear, not of humans, but of something else. Something it called the hunger between stars. "We're being deployed to Delta 7, Frank said, looking up from the tablet. "Command just sent the orders. They detected the same energy signature there 6 hours ago, and then nothing." "Delta 7? That's the research colony, isn't it?" Laura asked. Frank nodded. "Over 300 scientists and their families. They were studying quantum field dynamics. Very advanced stuff." He stood up and walked to the small viewport. The stars looked cold and distant. "I need a crew," he said quietly. "Not the one Command would assign. I need people who can think beyond training manuals." Laura smiled slightly. "I might know a few names." 3 days later, the UES Vigilant dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Delta 7. The colony planet hung in space before them, a blue-green world that looked peaceful from orbit. Frank stood on the bridge surrounded by the crew he had personally selected. At the engineering station sat Sam Powell, a brilliant mind whose theories on quantum propulsion had been rejected by the Academy as too radical. At Tactical was Nicole Grant, a woman who had saved her entire squad during the Proxima incident by disobeying direct orders and been dishonorably discharged for it. Monitoring the science station was Alan Davis, whose research into dimensional physics had been deemed too controversial by his peers. "Scans show normal atmosphere and conditions," Alan reported, his fingers dancing across his console. "No signs of damage to the colony structures, no radiation, no debris." "Life signs?" Frank asked. Alan shook his head. "Nothing showing up, Captain." Frank turned to Nicole. "Any defense systems active? Any signs of weapons discharge?" "Negative, sir. Their defense grid is intact but inactive. No evidence of combat." Frank took a deep breath. "Prepare a landing party. We go down in 30 minutes, full environmental suits until we confirm conditions on the ground." The shuttle descended through the atmosphere without incident. As they approached the colony, they could see the buildings standing intact. Solar panels gleamed in the sunlight. Vehicles sat parked in neat rows. A child's bicycle lay on its side near a playground. "It looks like everyone just left," Laura whispered, as they stepped out of the shuttle. Frank activated his suit's scanner. "Spread out. Teams of 2. Report anything unusual." The colony was eerily pristine. No signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies. Even the air was clean when they tested it and removed their helmets. In the central plaza, a half-eaten meal sat on a cafe table. A cup of coffee had spilled, the liquid now dried in a brown stain. A children's ball rested motionless in the middle of a game court. "Captain, you need to see this," Sam called over the comm. "We're in the main research facility." Frank and Laura hurried to join him. The research building was a large structure of glass and metal in the center of the colony. Inside, computers still hummed, lights still burned, papers lay scattered as if in the middle of work. Sam pointed to a computer terminal. I found their security logs. The last entry was from 3 days ago, right when the energy signature was detected. He pressed a button, and a video appeared on screen. A woman with gray hair tied back in a neat bun was speaking directly to the camera. Daily log, Dr. Karen Young. We've detected unusual quantum fluctuations in Sector 7. The readings suggest some kind of dimensional. The woman stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she looked up at something off camera. Her mouth opened in what might have been a scream, but no sound came out. Then the video cut to static. Rewind and enhance. The audio, Frank ordered. Sam worked the controls. When he played it again, they could hear something in the background just before the feed cut out. A sound like the distant howl of a wolf, but distorted, unnatural. It made the hair on the back of Frank's neck stand up. I've heard that sound before, he said quietly. In the stories the Altarian prisoner told me. Stories about what? Laura asked. About a ship older than any known civilization. A living vessel that learned to hunt between the stars. The Altarians had a name for it, that roughly translates to the one that comes before sound. Alan, who had been examining some research notes, looked up sharply. These scientists were experimenting with trans-dimensional communication. They were trying to send signals through subspace. They were making noise, Nicole said grimly. And something heard them. Frank walked to the window and looked out at the empty colony. 300 people gone without a trace. And somewhere out there, something was moving through the darkness between stars, something ancient and hungry. The void howler, he whispered to himself. They reached into the void and the void reached back. He turned to face his crew. We need to report this to command, but they won't believe us without proof. Download everything from their computers. Gather all the research notes. We need to understand what they were doing here and why it attracted this thing. As they worked, Frank couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was still here, invisible but present, studying them as they studied, the empty colony. And somewhere, just at the edge of hearing, he thought he could detect a faint, distant howl. The UES Vigilant moved silently through space, 3 weeks after their disturbing discovery at Delta 7. The crew had settled into a tense routine, analyzing data from each vanished colony, searching for patterns that might reveal the nature of their unseen enemy. In the science lab, Alan Davis hunched over his workstation, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Scattered around him were holographic displays showing microscopic scans from each colony site. Found something? Frank asked as he entered the lab, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Alan took one gratefully. Yes, and it's stranger than I expected. He pointed to a series of wavering lines on his screen. These are tears in the fabric of space-time, Captain. Microscopic but present at every colony we visited. Meaning what exactly? Frank leaned closer to the display. Meaning whatever took those people didn't use conventional travel methods. It forced its way through dimensions rather than moving through normal space. Alan brought up another image. It's like something punched holes between realities. Frank felt a chill run down his spine. Could this be natural? Not a chance. Alan shook his head firmly. These patterns are too precise, too regular. This is technology, Captain. Incredibly advanced technology. The ship's intercom crackled. Captain to engineering. Sam Powell's voice sounded excited. I've found something you need to see. In the engine room, Sam had set up a makeshift analysis station. Floating in a containment field was a small fragment of metal, no larger than a thumbnail. Where did you get that? Frank asked. From the debris field at Military Outpost Kappa, Sam replied. At first I thought it was just space junk, but the composition is, well, impossible. Sam brought up a detailed scan. It's an alloy of elements that shouldn't be stable together. And the dating system says it's billions of years old. Frank stared at the fragment. Older than human civilization. Older than most of the galaxy's civilizations, Sam corrected. Whatever this came from, it wasn't built by any species we know. Before Frank could respond, the ship's alarm blared. "Captain to the bridge," Laura's voice called over the intercom. Frank rushed to the bridge where Laura and Nicole were bent over the communications console. "We're picking up a distress call," Laura explained, her face pale. "From Mining Outpost 12 on the edge of human space." "Play it," Frank ordered. The speakers crackled with static before a panicked voice broke through. "This is Mining Outpost 12. Something's happening. The sensors are going crazy. There's some kind of massive object appearing near the..." The voice cut off suddenly, replaced by a haunting, distorted howl that made everyone on the bridge freeze. "That's the same sound from the Delta 7 recording," Laura whispered. Frank turned to Nicole. "How far to Mining Outpost 12? "At maximum FTL 6 hours, she replied, already plotting the course. "Get us there now," Frank ordered. 6 hours later, the Vigilant dropped out of FTL near where Mining Outpost 12 should have been. But instead of the expected small station built into an asteroid, they found only empty space. "Scan the area," Frank ordered, his voice tight. Alan worked his console frantically. "Captain, the asteroid is gone. Not destroyed, completely gone. There's not even debris." "That's impossible," Sam said from his engineering station. "That asteroid was over 3 kilometers wide." "Check for those space-time tiers," Frank suggested. Alan nodded, adjusting his scanners. "They're here, sir. Hundreds of them, much larger than the ones we found before." "Sir," Nicole called from Tactical. "I'm detecting traces of the same energy signature we recorded at the other sites. Whatever was here, it left less than an hour ago." Frank stood still, thinking. It's getting bolder. The first attacks were on remote colonies, then a military outpost, now a mining facility closer to core worlds. It's working its way inward, Laura realized. Toward Earth. Frank nodded grimly. "Plot a course back to fleet headquarters. We need to warn..." His words were cut short as the ship suddenly lurched. All lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into darkness. Emergency power came on seconds later, bathing everything in red light. "What happened?" Frank demanded. "Massive power surge," Sam reported, his fingers flying over his console. "All systems temporarily overloaded." "Sir." Nicole's voice was tight with fear. "Sensors detecting a massive object less than 1 kilometer off our port side." The main screen flickered to life, showing the view from the ship's external cameras. For one brief, terrible moment, they all saw it. A vessel of impossible size, at least 20 times larger than the Vigilant. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating a ship-shaped void against the stars. The surface wasn't solid but shifted and rippled like liquid metal, and then between one heartbeat and the next it was gone. "Where did it go?" Frank demanded. "It's nowhere," Alan stammered, staring at his readings. "No FTL signature, no conventional propulsion wake, it just ceased to exist in our space." The ship's speakers suddenly emitted that same haunting howl they had heard on the distress call, but louder now, more defined. A sound that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the bones. "It phased back into whatever dimension it travels through," Alan said quietly. "But it saw us, Captain. It knows we're following it." Frank stared at the empty space where the massive ship had been moments before. "Can we track it?" Alan shook his head. "Not with our current technology. But..." He hesitated, then continued. "I might be able to modify our sensors based on what we just recorded. Create a detection system that could give us some warning before it appears again." "Do it," Frank ordered. He turned to the navigation officer. "Resume course to fleet headquarters, maximum speed." As the Vigilant turned toward Earth, Frank couldn't shake the image of that massive, shifting hull from his mind. They had seen the Void Howler face to face, and somehow he knew it had seen them too. Had studied them, cataloged them, hunted them. "It's not just a ship," he said quietly to Laura, as they stood watching the stars streak by. "Did you feel it when it appeared? That wasn't just technology we saw, there was something alive about it." Laura nodded slowly, like it was looking at us. really looking. Frank remembered the stories the Altarian prisoner had told him years ago. Tales of a living ship that consumed entire worlds, that collected civilizations like trophies, a predator that had hunted among the stars since the first intelligent species looked up at the night sky. "We need to warn Earth," he said. "Whatever this thing is, it's heading toward the heart of human space, and I don't think our weapons can stop it." Behind them, the stars continued to streak by as the Vigilant raced home, carrying a warning that might already be too late. The grand meeting hall of Fleet headquarters buzzed with tense voices. Frank stood at the center of the room, surrounded by admirals and generals whose faces showed varying degrees of disbelief and concern. "You expect us to believe that some ancient living ship is hunting our colonies?" Admiral Paul Rogers asked, his thick eyebrows drawn together in a frown. Frank pointed to the holographic display showing the data they had collected. "The evidence is clear, sir. 7 colonies gone without a trace. The energy signatures, the space-time tiers, and we saw it ourselves. A vessel unlike anything in our records." The admirals exchanged glances. Frank could see they wanted to dismiss his report as fantasy, but the data was too solid to ignore completely. A door at the far end of the room slid open. A woman in an admiral's uniform entered, her silver hair cut short against her scalp. The room fell silent. "Admiral Carol Hughes," Laura whispered to Frank, "head of Special Intelligence Division." Admiral Hughes walked to the center of the room, her eyes fixed on Frank. "Captain Miller, your report matches classified intelligence we've received from other species in the galactic community." She pressed a button on her wrist device, and the holographic display changed to show images from various alien worlds, scenes of devastation, empty cities, and strange energy readings. For thousands of years, advanced civilizations have recorded similar attacks. The Altarians call it the Devourer. The Proxima refer to it as the World Eater. Each description is slightly different, but they all speak of the same entity, a predator that hunts intelligent life. Frank felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Then you believe us?" Admiral Hughes nodded grimly. "I'm assigning someone to work with your crew. He's been studying this phenomenon for decades." A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the room. His worn face suggested years spent poring over ancient texts and records. "This is Dr. William Ford, our leading xenoarchaeologist," Admiral Hughes said. "He's dedicated his life to tracking references to this entity across multiple alien cultures." "Doctor," Ford offered a slight bow. "Captain Miller, your encounter is the clearest evidence we've had in centuries. Most species only record the aftermath, never the entity itself." Later, in a secure briefing room, Dr. Ford spread out his research materials for Frank's crew. Ancient scrolls, digital records, and stone tablets covered the table. "It's not just a ship," Dr. Ford explained, his voice quiet but intense. "According to the oldest texts, it was one of the first sentient species to evolve in our galaxy. But something changed it. Isolation, perhaps, or exposure to forces we can't comprehend. It became something that exists between normal space and something else." "The void," Alan suggested. "A dimension outside our own." Dr. Ford nodded. "Many cultures describe it as the howling void that consumes worlds. They believe it doesn't destroy its victims but collects them, adds their knowledge and technology to its own, like a museum curator," Laura said with a shudder. While the others listened to Dr. Ford, Nicole slipped away to access classified files using codes she'd obtained during her Special Forces days. What she discovered sent her running back to the briefing room, her face pale. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, pulling Frank aside and showing him her data tablet. "I found records in the restricted archives, our rapid technological advancement over the past century. It wasn't entirely our own doing." Frank scanned the information, his expression hardening. "Reverse-engineered artifacts of unknown origin." Nicole nodded. "Key breakthroughs in FTL travel, quantum communications, energy weapons. They all came from studying technology we found drifting in deep space, technology that might have belonged to the Void Howler's previous victims." Frank looked up sharply. "Which means we've been using the same energy signatures that seem to attract it," Sam finished, joining their hushed conversation. "We might as well have been sending up flares." Dr. Ford overheard them. That fits with my research. The entity seems drawn to civilizations that reach a certain technological threshold, particularly those that begin to experiment with dimensional physics. Like the scientists at Delta 7, Frank said grimly. An alarm suddenly blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed as a voice came over the speakers. All personnel to battle stations. Unknown entity detected in the Sol system. This is not a drill. They rushed to the command center where chaos had erupted. The main screen showed a massive energy distortion near Jupiter, growing larger by the second. It's here, Dr. Ford whispered. In our home system. Admiral Hughes turned to Frank. Captain Miller, you've encountered this thing and survived. What are our options? Frank watched as the energy readings on the screen spiked. Conventional weapons will be useless against something that exists between dimensions. We need to think differently. Sam stepped forward. Captain, I have an idea. The Vigilance Experimental Quantum Core. We could modify it to produce an intensified version of the energy signature the Howler is attracted to. You want to use our ship as bait? Frank asked. Sam nodded. We lure it away from Earth, then spring a trap. What kind of trap could possibly work against that thing? Laura asked. The unstable neutron star in the Cygnus system, Alan suggested. Its extreme gravitational forces might prevent the Howler from phasing between dimensions, making it vulnerable. Frank turned to Admiral Hughes. We need the Vigilant ready to launch in 1 hour, with all the resources you can spare. The Admiral hesitated only briefly before nodding. Done. But Captain, she added quietly, you understand this is likely a one-way mission. Frank looked around at his crew, Sam, Nicole, Laura, and Alan. Each nodded slightly, accepting the risk. The alternative is watching Earth disappear like those colonies, Frank said. We'll take our chances. As they hurried toward the docking bay, Dr. Ford fell into step beside Frank. Captain, there's something else you should know. The oldest. Tech suggests this entity isn't unique. It may be just one of many. Frank stopped walking. Many. Ancient beings that evolved when the universe was young, Dr. Ford explained. Entities that learned to move between dimensions to feed on the energy of whole civilizations. The Void Howler might just be the first one we've encountered. Frank absorbed this grim possibility, then continued toward the ship. One problem at a time. First, they had to save Earth. Then, if they survived, they could worry about what other horrors might be watching from the spaces between stars. Behind them, the alarm continued to wail as humanity prepared to face an enemy unlike any they had ever known. The modified UES Vigilant shot through space, its engines glowing with an unnatural blue light. In engineering, Sam worked frantically to increase the power to the quantum core. The ship shuddered as energy levels rose far beyond safe limits. For much longer can we maintain this output? Frank asked over the intercom. Sam wiped sweat from his forehead. The core was never designed for this kind of strain, Captain. Maybe 2 hours before it starts to break down. That should be enough, Frank replied. He turned to Alan at the science station. Any sign it's following us? Alan studied his readouts. The energy distortion near Jupiter is dissipating. Something massive is moving away from Earth at high speed. He looked up, his face pale. It's pursuing us, Captain. Frank nodded grimly. Good. Nicole, set course for the Cygnus system. Maximum speed. As the Vigilant accelerated to its top speed, the ship's sensors detected a disturbance forming behind them. On the main screen, space itself seemed to ripple and tear. It's gaining on us, Laura reported from her station. At current speeds, it will overtake us before we reach Cygnus. Push the engines harder, Frank ordered. Sam's voice came back, strained. Captain, we're already at 120% of rated capacity. Any more and we risk a core breach. Frank made a quick decision. Divert power from life support on decks 3 through 5. We've evacuated those areas anyway. The ship surged forward as additional power flowed to the engines. Behind them, the distortion continued to grow. For the next hour, the Vigilant raced through space with the Void Howler in pursuit. The distance between them gradually decreased despite the ship's desperate speed. Approaching the Cygnus system, Nicole announced. The neutron star is coming into sensor range. Frank leaned forward in his chair. Take us in. Establish orbit. At the calculated distance. The neutron star appeared on their view screen, a tiny point of incredible brightness. Its immense gravity pulled at the ship even from a safe distance. Adjusting course for optimal orbit, Nicole said, her hands steady despite the tension in her voice. As the Vigilant circled the neutron star, Alan's console began to beep urgently. Captain, we're getting our first clear scan of the pursuer. It's massive. The main screen shifted to show what was following them. The crew fell silent as they finally got a sustained look at their enemy. The void Howler defied easy description. Its hull seemed to be composed of countless smaller ships fused together into one enormous entity. Parts of it shifted and changed, shape even as they watched. It wasn't just mechanical. Sections pulsed with what looked like organic tissue. The entire construct stretched at least 20 kilometers from end to end. It's not just a ship, Alan whispered. It's both living and machine at once. As they watched, the Howler slowed its approach. It seemed cautious of the neutron star's gravitational field. It's working, Frank said. The gravity is affecting its ability to phase between dimensions. We're receiving transmissions, Laura suddenly announced. It's broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. Put it through, Frank ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and everyone froze as thousands of voices filled the air. Some screamed in terror. Others called for help in languages no one recognized. A few spoke in English, begging for rescue or describing horrors the crew couldn't comprehend. Their recordings, Laura realized, her face ashen. The final moments of countless civilizations preserved and replayed. Like trophies, Nicole whispered. Earth's defense fleet arrived moments later, hundreds of ships surrounding the trapped entity at a safe distance. Admiral Hughes' voice came through on a secure channel. Excellent work, Captain Miller. The Howler appears unable to escape the star's gravitational influence. We're preparing to fire all weapons. Frank exchanged glances with his crew. Admiral, conventional weapons may not be effective against... His warning came too late. The fleet opened fire, energy beams and missiles streaking toward the void Howler. For a moment, it seemed to work. The massive entity shuddered under the assault, but then it extended long tendrils of dark energy that cut through the attacking ships like paper. Within minutes, half the fleet was destroyed. Our plan is failing, Sam said, rushing onto the bridge. The neutron star isn't strong enough to fully trap it. We need something else, Frank replied, watching helplessly as more ships were destroyed. Sam took a deep breath. I think we need to detonate the Vigilance quantum core directly inside the Howler while it's trapped in normal space. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. That would tear a hole in reality itself, Alan said quietly. Exactly, Sam nodded. It might be the only thing powerful enough to destroy something that exists between dimensions. Frank stared at the massive entity on the screen. We'd need to get the core inside it somehow. I can do it, Nicole said, stepping forward. I can pilot a shuttle carrying the core, get close enough to deliver it. Frank shook his head. It's a suicide mission. We're talking about the survival of our entire species, Nicole replied firmly. Maybe the entire galaxy. I'm volunteering, Captain. After a long moment, Frank nodded. Prepare the shuttle. Sam, how long will it take to remove the core? 20 minutes, Sam replied. But once removed, we'll have no power except emergency systems. Do it, Frank ordered. While Sam and his team worked to extract the quantum core, Frank sent a message to the remaining fleet ships, ordering them to maintain their distance. Then he turned to Nicole. You understand there's no coming back from this. She nodded, her expression calm. Some missions don't have return tickets, Captain. I've always known that. 20 minutes later, Nicole sat in the pilot seat of a small shuttle, the glowing quantum core secured behind her. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the battle raging outside. Core is set to detonate on my command, she reported. Launching now. The shuttle shot out of the Vigilant toward the massive void Howler. On the bridge, Frank and the others watched in tense silence. As Nicole approached the entity, its surface seemed to react. A section parted like a mouth, revealing a swirling vortex of stars and darkness, glimpses of other dimensions and possibly other times. I'm seeing... I don't know how to describe it, Nicole's voice came through, filled with awe and terror. It's like looking into every reality at once. The shuttle was suddenly caught in what appeared to be a tractor beam, pulling it toward the opening. It's got me, Nicole reported, her voice steady despite everything. But that's exactly what we wanted. Instead of fighting the pull, she accelerated, plunging deep into the Howler's interior. The last thing they heard from her was a quiet laugh. See you in another dimension, Captain. Then her signal went dead. Frank closed his eyes. Goodbye, Nicole. A blinding flash erupted from within the void Howler, too bright to look at directly. The neutron star's gravity seemed to amplify the explosion, creating a chain reaction that spread throughout the massive entity. The void Howler didn't explode outward as much as collapse inward, imploding into the dimensional rift created by the quantum core. A shock wave of temporal energy washed over the fleet, disabling all systems temporarily. When power returned, the bridge crew of the Vigilant stared at their sensors in disbelief. The Howler was gone. The journey back to Earth was slow and somber. With its quantum core gone, the UES Vigilant limped home on backup power, towed by other ships from the fleet. Frank spent most of his time staring out the viewport at the stars, thinking about Nicole and her sacrifice. When they finally reached Earth orbit, cheering crowds greeted them. News of their victory had spread quickly. The crew of the Vigilant were hailed as heroes who had saved humanity from an unimaginable threat. But Frank felt no joy in their celebration. During the quiet journey home, Alan had made a disturbing discovery. It's not over, Frank told Admiral Hughes in her office at Fleet Headquarters. The explosion did more than destroy the void Howler. Alan stepped forward, his face grim. The quantum core detonation tore holes in the fabric between dimensions. We're detecting unusual activity throughout the galaxy. He placed a data tablet on the Admiral's desk. These readings suggest we can now see glimpses of what exists beyond our universe. Admiral Hughes studied the data. And what exactly are we seeing? More entities like the void Howler, Frank said quietly. Even larger and more ancient. And they've noticed us now. The Admiral's face paled. How many? Alan shook his head. Impossible to say for certain. Dozens. Perhaps hundreds. They exist in a dimension that overlaps with ours in ways we don't fully understand. We didn't just kill one monster, Frank added. We alerted many more to our presence. For the next month, a tense quiet settled over Earth as scientists and military leaders debated what to do. Frank and his remaining crew were pulled into endless meetings and debriefings. Then one morning, Frank was summoned to a special session of the United Earth Defense Council. The highest-ranking officers and government officials were gathered in a secure underground chamber. Admiral Hughes stood at the center of the room. Captain Miller, in light of the threat we now face, the Council has approved a new initiative. She gestured to a holographic display showing designs for a new type of ship. We're calling it the Void Patrol, a fleet specifically designed to monitor the weakened boundaries between dimensions. Frank studied the ship designs. They incorporated technology reverse-engineered from fragments of the void Howler. We want you to lead this new force, the Admiral continued. Your experience makes you uniquely qualified. Frank looked around, the room at the expectant faces. What exactly would be our mission? To stand guard against what lurks in the spaces between stars, Admiral Hughes replied. To be our first line of defense against any more of these entities that might turn their attention toward our dimension. Frank thought about Nicole, about the empty colonies, about the recordings of thousands of voices crying out in their final moments. I'll do it, he said. But I want the Vigilant as my flagship. The Vigilant was heavily damaged, one of the officials objected. Then we'll rebuild her, Frank insisted. Better, stronger, with everything we've learned. 3 months later, Frank stood on the bridge of the newly rebuilt UES Vigilant. The ship had been enhanced with knowledge gleaned from the Howler's remains. Its hull was reinforced with the same strange alloy Sam had discovered. Its sensors were specifically designed to detect dimensional anomalies before they fully manifested. Most important was the new quantum communications array that could detect the unique howl of approaching entities long before they materialized in normal space. Laura Bennett, now promoted to commander, stood at his side. Sam Powell had redesigned the ship's engines to move faster than any vessel in Earth's fleet. Alan Davis headed a new science division devoted to dimensional physics. "All systems ready, Captain," Laura reported. "The rest of the Void Patrol fleet is standing by for your orders." Frank nodded. "Set course for the dimensional weak point near Proxima Centauri. That's where the readings are strongest." As the new fleet prepared to depart, Alan approached Frank with a troubled expression. "Captain, there's something you should know. I've been analyzing the Howler's transmissions, those recordings of its victims." "What about them?" Frank asked. "Some of the voices were speaking in languages that haven't evolved yet," Alan said quietly. "Languages that, according to our linguists, won't exist for thousands of years." Frank stared at him. "You're saying the Howler didn't just travel through space, but time as well," Alan finished. "These entities may exist outside our normal flow of time. They could be hunting across all of history simultaneously." Frank absorbed this new, unsettling information. "All the more reason for us to get out. There. Ready or not, we're the first line of defense now." The Vigilant led the fleet away from Earth, venturing into the darkness between stars. From his captain's chair, Frank activated the ship's enhanced sensors. The display lit up, showing hundreds of faint signatures moving through the void. Some were retreating deeper into unknown dimensions. Others were approaching. "There," Frank said, pointing to a cluster of signatures near a distant star system. "Set course for those coordinates." "What do you think we'll find there, Captain?" Laura asked. Frank watched the moving lights on the display. "I don't know. But whatever these things are, wherever they come from, they need to learn that humanity isn't easy prey." As the fleet accelerated toward their destination, Frank thought about the colonies that had been lost, the people who had vanished without a trace. Perhaps they were still out there somewhere, trapped in the spaces between dimensions. Perhaps one day they could even be rescued. But first, humanity needed to survive, and that meant understanding their new enemy, learning to detect them before they struck, learning to fight beings that existed partially outside normal reality. The UES Vigilant and its fleet of sister ships raced toward the unknown, carrying humanity's best and brightest into a war unlike any they had fought before, a war for the very nature of reality itself. On the edge of sensor range, something massive stirred in the darkness, something ancient and patient and hungry. Frank Miller stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, staring into the abyss of space. But this time, the abyss wasn't just staring back. It was coming for them. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered calmly. "Let's show these things what happens when they hunt humans." The Void Patrol ships formed up around the Vigilant, weapons charged and shields raised. Ahead of them, space itself began to ripple and tear. The hunt had begun again. But this time, humans were no longer just the prey, they were hunters too.